answer D. Hydrogens will cause the percentage oxygen saturations of hemoglobin to decrease in the actively respiring muscles. So when we look at this curve, right, so you can see, yeah, these curves are divided into two regions, so we can have a look. Okay, so here is a increase in the partial pressure of oxygens. So from 2, 4, 6, 8 until 10. And then here will be the percentage. Okay, here will be the percentage of the saturations of the hemoglobins to the oxygens. So we can see when the partial pressure oxygens is increased, when they increase, it will increase the affinity. Yeah, it will increase. So here, right, it will increase the affinity of the hemoglobin bind to the oxygens. So which is at this site, right, the hemoglobin tend to combine with oxygens to form this oxyhemoglobin. But at the, so this is what happens when there's a high partial pressure of oxygens. So how about when there's a very low partial pressure oxygens? So the oxyhemoglobin will tend to dissociate to release the oxygens. So they will have these free hemoglobins. So when you want to cause the reduce in the oxygen saturation of hemoglobin, which is the hemoglobins will tend to, which is the hemoglobin, right, they will tend to release the oxygens. So that means that you need to increase the hydrogen concentrations, or you need to increase the carbon dioxide level. So as you can see, yeah, so this is the normal graph. Okay, yeah, here the pH 7.4 will be the normal graph. So actually this pH 7.4, right, is referred to the normal situation, which is a normal blood pH. But what happens if there's a increasing in the amount of the carbon dioxide? Because carbon dioxide is a kind of acidic gas. Carbon dioxide 它是酸性这个气体。So when you increase the carbon dioxide, actually you are increasing the hydrogen concentrations, because you are actually reducing the pH, become more acidic. I mean the blood pH, right? The blood pH will become more acidic. The blood pH will become more acidic. So you actually encourage the dissociation, okay, which is this dissociation of the oxyhemoglobin to release the oxygens. So there will be two kind of factors will allow the oxyhemoglobin tend to dissociate to release the oxygens. So first is the increasing in the carbon dioxide concentrations. So it will increase the hydrogen ions. But usually the hydrogen ions will be the main factors. Anhydrates will catalyze the associations of carbon dioxide and water. So you can refer to this picture. So you can see after the respiring tissue releases the carbon dioxide, so the carbon dioxide will be combined with the H2O, and then they will form what? They will form the carbonic acids. So this reaction is being catalyzed by the carbonic anhydrates. So later the carbonic anhydrate, they will dissociate, and then they will become hydrogen ions and the bicarbonate ions. Answer is B, because you want to calculate the percentage decrease in the blood pressures. So here is a formula, okay? So which is the percentage of decreasing difference. You need to know the difference in the value and over the original value. times 100%. So the difference, okay, because you want to calculate between the arteriole and the arterial ends. So at the arterial ends, arterioles is a type of the smaller form of the artery, so they will direct the blood flow into the arterial end of the capillary, so which is from here to here. So that's why you need to know the difference. So the difference is 11.3 minus 4.7 over 11.3, okay, over the 11.3. So that's why you get the answers 6.6 over 11.3 times 100, and then you get 58%. And then for this one, the function of the arteriole to increase or decrease the flow of the blood to the tissue. So this increase or decrease, they're actually referring to what? They are referring to the increasing the blood flow to the tissue when you are doing the vasodilation, which is you dilate the blood vessel. Then when you want to decrease the blood flow to the tissue, right, actually you are doing what? You are doing the vasoconstriction. So this process is being controlled by the smooth muscle only. So that is donkey. Now, collagens will not help to increase or decrease the blood flow of. Collagen will not help to increase or decrease the flow of the blood to the tissue. It's because collagen is just like the 钢筋, okay? So collagens, they will not able to change the blood flow, but what they can do is they can withstand very high pressure. Okay, and then they can prevent rupturing of the blood vessel. So this is their functions. So endotheliums, they will just form the basement membrane of the blood capillary. Okay, they will just form the wall. They're just lining up on the wall of the blood vessel. So no matter it's the arteries, vein or capillary, they will have these endotheliums. 不管是在这个静脉、动脉还是这个毛细微血管，它们都有着一层的这个 tissue 在里面，就在这个 tunica intima. So the mammalian circulatory system is closed and double because they have a pulmonary and systemic circulations, and they are being enclosed in the blood vessels. This is C. It's because they're asking about the adult hemoglobins tested to determine the saturation with the oxygens, and at the partial pressure of 0 kPa, the saturation was about 0. But when you increase the saturations of the oxygens to about 97%, you get the partial pressure of 14 kPa. So which will show the possible percentage of saturation of hemoglobins. So why the answer is C? Is because you need to know the curve, right? Yeah, so when you draw the curve, it will be like in this way. So here will be the partial pressure oxygens, and then here will be the percentage of the oxygens saturation. So what happens if the graph is actually look like this? You are actually slowly increase. You are actually slowly increase the curve. So initially it's slowly increase until they increase steeply until they maintain the constant level and become almost equals plateau. So you can see right here will be the request a steep increase in the gradient， 就是说它的这个 gradient 是很我们讲很陡峭的 ，okay, a very steep gradient. It refers to a very steep increase of saturations of hemoglobins to the oxygens. So that's why the answer is C, okay? Because from the 2 kPa, right, steep increase in equilibrium. So the answer is C, because in the 2 kPa, when you increase to 4 kPa, 7 kPa, 12 kPa, so you can see between 2 and 4, there will be a very steep increase. So that's why the oxygen dissociation curve, right, they always appear in the sigmoidal curve. So it's just a sigmoid shape due to the cooperative binding. So the answer is C, is because that the saturation initially is 15, but from 2 to 4 kPa, right, they will just shoot up from 15 to 56%. So this will represent the steep part of the curve shown by the cooperative binding. 就说它是一下子增加很快的 ，OK， 在它中间那个点，所以答案是 C， 而不是这个 A、B 还是 D，OK， 因为其他的这个它是增加很慢。好像你看 A 的话是 increase by 5% only， 然后 B 的话它就是太过 steadily increase 了，所以它不符合那种我们讲 explosive increase in the middle， 所以我们要的是这个 OK， 就是说它一下子增加很快due to 的这个 cooperative binding which is this one, OK, cooperative binding. Answer is B. So we have about 3 types of the notes. First is the SA note, sino-atria note. So just remember that sino-atria note is the pacemaker. Why? Because it initiates the electrical impulse. So the impulse will be transmitted from the SA node to the AV node. So when the impulse they reach the AV node, right, which is in the second node, so they will have a delay. So delay means that 它会有一些延迟。The delay will give the atria enough time to finish the contractions and empty their blood into the ventricles before the ventricle begin to squeeze. So why there's a need of delay 就是为了给这个足够的时间，让这个 atria， 让这个 atriums， 包括 left and right atriums， 他们可以把所有的这个血 pump to the ventricle， 所以他们需要点时间，所以that's why there's an AV delay C is correct answer. So why A is wrong? Because the contraction of heart muscle, they cause the blood to enter the arteries. They pump the blood into the organs. So this artery pump the blood to the organs, right? It is incorrect. This artery, they pump the blood to the organs is incorrect because artery will not pump. Only the heart is the organs able to pump the blood. Artery will just help to carry the oxygenated blood away from the heart, reach the other part of the organs. So artery, they have a very thick elastic wall. Okay, they can stretch and recoil to maintain the blood pressures because artery, they have a smooth muscle, and then they can smooth out the flow due to the presence of the elastic fibers, but they will not able to ultimately generate pumping force like in hearts. And then number B, okay? And then number B, the heart connect 2 types of blood vessels so that oxygen from the lungs can be distributed by the red blood cell and waste carried into tissue for renewal. So this is also incorrect because the hearts, right, it wrote that the heart connects arteries and veins, but the actual exchange of oxygen and the waste, they just happen at the capillary, and then it's not mentioned at here. Okay, it says that the heart connect 2 types of blood vessels, which is one is artery, one is vein. They can connect to each other. It is incorrect because they should have from the artery to the capillary and then to the vein. They must pass through the capillary. And then number D, the heart provides enough pressure to push the blood through the artery to the capillary between the cell. Okay, it states that the formation of tissue fluid, right, can diffuse back into the vein. No, the tissue fluid is not drained directly to the vein, okay, because it will re-enter the capillary, which is at the venous end, and then back to the lymphatic system. So from the lymphatic system, okay, they will go back to the heart. They will go back to the heart, go back to the circulatory system. And then the re-entry of tissue fluid into the capillary is driven by the osmosis. It is not by the simple diffusion, because it wrote that diffuse, okay, so this diffuse is incorrect because they just undergo the osmosis. Okay, I hope you still remember. So here is a blood vessel, okay, here's a blood vessel, here will be the red blood cell, okay, red blood cell along the way. So here will be the body cell. Yeah, so here is a lot of tissue fluid. So how come the tissue fluid, they can flow back at the venule end of the blood capillary? Is due to inside the red blood cell, right, there will have a lot of the, we call as plasma protein, okay, because plasma protein, they are too large in the size, so they are unable to pass through the gaps between the endothelial cell of the blood capillary and enters into the tissue fluid. So there will be higher plasma proteins inside the blood plasma. So this will able to, we call as a reduce, okay, this will reduce the presence of large plasma proteins in the blood plasma. They will reduce the water potential. So this symbol is a water potential. But in the tissue fluid, right, due to the less presence of the plasma protein, so there will be the higher water potential. So from the high water potential, they will diffuse by the osmosis into the low water potential. The blood in the pulmonary capillary have more oxygens, and blood in the aorta have the same level of oxygen. Why? Because atrial septal defects refer to there is a hole between the right atrium and the left atrium, which is at here. So what will happen is, because the blood pressure is higher in the left atrium, so we can see here will be the higher pressure. Right atrium will have a lower pressure. So it will cause the oxygenated blood from the left atriums push through the hole to the right atriums. So right atrium, right, and then there's a blood vessel connecting the right atriums to the lungs. So the name of the blood vessels are known as the pulmonary arteries. So here is the pulmonary artery. They help to carry the deoxygenated blood from the right atriums back to the lungs. So that's why the pulmonary arteries, there will be increase in the oxygen contents due to the oxygenated blood leak out from the left atriums. So the leak causes some of the blood to escape to the right side, but it does not allow the deoxygenated blood to enter to the left side. Okay, because left atrium is higher in pressure, right atrium will be lower in the pressures. So that's why the pulmonary artery will carry more oxygen. However, in the aorta will still remains at the same level of oxygen. It's because that the aorta is another kind of blood vessel connecting from the left atrium to the all part body. So here will be the aorta, okay, and that is the largest blood vessels carry the oxygenated blood. So it will still carry the same level of oxygen. 所以因为这个 atrial septal defect 这有个洞口嘛，所以这个 left atrium 的这个血是 from the 所以这个 left atrium carry 的这个 oxygenated blood 啊，它会漏去 right atrium. So initially the right atrium 它是 carry 这个 deoxygenated blood， 所以的时候还会 receive some of 的这个oxygenated blood from the left atrium， 所以还会导致这个 pulmonary artery carry more oxygen. Answer is B. So 1 and 3 is correct. Number 2 is wrong. It's because left atrium, left ventricles, they will contain the oxygenated blood go to the systemic circulation. It's not pulmonary. Pulmonary circulation is being entered by the right atriums and right ventricles. And then number 4, the pressure of blood in the aorta is higher than in artery. Okay, just remember that aorta is the largest artery in our body and it has the highest blood pressure. A is the answer. So this showing the 3 animals, 1, 2, 3, and then just need to know that if the curve moving to the right side, right, it refers to the right shift, or sometimes we call it ball effects. So ball effect means that the hemoglobins have a lower affinity, have a less affinity for the oxygens. So it means that the oxyhemoglobin, they tend to release the oxygens. But on the right, on the left side, okay, on the left side, which is called left shift, the hemoglobins have a higher affinity, okay, they have a higher affinity to oxygens. So this is mean that the hemoglobin tend to bind to the oxygens. This means that the hemoglobin tend to bind to the oxygen to form the oxyhemoglobins. So this number is A, okay, because the animal 1, which is, they refer to this curve, right? This animal 1, they refer to this curve. So this animal 1 is left shift. So they have a higher affinity for the oxygens than the animal 2. So number B is wrong, okay, because they say that animal 3, they have a higher affinity for oxygen and the animal 2. So this will be the lower affinity. And then number C, right, the animal 3 with the hemoglobin adapt to maintain lower respiration rate than the animal 2. So 这个是说 animal 3啊，它适应维持这个更低的这个呼吸力，所以这个是以这个their curve, okay, shift to the right side is not correct, because if you have a lower respiration rate, means that you should have a higher affinity of the hemoglobin to the oxygens, because you doesn't need too much oxygens released to the tissue, right? So this is not correct. And number D also, okay, so this is also incorrect. It's because that higher respiration rate 更高的呼吸力，所以更高的呼吸力代表它的这个亲和力，它需要有非常低的亲和力来支持这个氧气的释放给这个组织，所以 if 它有一个 higher respiration rate 代表它是要往这个 right side 的方向移，所以它必须要往这个方向移过去，所以这个也是错的，因为这个 animal 1 它是往 left side 的方向移。So this cell with the kidney bean shape is a monocyte. Then this cell with the large round prominent nucleus, it is a lymphocyte. And here, okay, with the multi-lobe nucleus, right, so it is the neutrophil. So the answer is B. Okay, X is monocyte. Okay, then Z, right, it is a neutrophil. So what neutrophil they can do is they can perform the phagocytosis. So this is an example of neutrophil. They engulf the bacteria by the endocytosis. So it's an overall process about the phagocytosis. So the Y is a lymphocyte. So lymphocyte, they will produce the antibodies against the antigens on the. So lymphocyte, they will produce an antibody to bind to the antigens on the surface of the pathogens. So this is D. So this means that when the oxygen molecule pass through the cell surface membrane from the air in the alveolus and get into hemoglobins, which is a protein found inside the red blood cell, they need to pass through about 5 membranes. So here is the picture. You can have a look. So first, here's the oxygen, right? The oxygens, they just pass through the alveolar epitheliums. So remember that this is the alveolus, right? And then there will be a thin layer lining the alveolus. So this is first membrane. So they enter the alveolus epitheliums, which is first membrane, and then when the acids from the outwards epithelium to outside. So that will be the second membrane. And then they will enter into the capillary endoderms, which is the third membrane, okay, which is from here. And then the acids through the capillary endoderms. So this is another membrane. And then they get into the red blood cell. So red blood cell is a kind of animal cell, and then they will have the membrane. 所以红血球它是有这个细胞膜的 membrane. So until they get into the hemoglobin. So remember that hemoglobin is a kind of protein found inside the red blood cell. So hemoglobin is just a structure, okay? It's not a kind of organelles. It's not organelles. So there will be no membrane in the hemoglobin. So total will be 5 membranes, okay? 5 membranes into the pass through. 所以就是说很多现在错的一点就是说他们完全是忽略这个细胞两面，所以他们会把这个穿过一个细胞默认成穿过一个细胞膜，所以就是说需要强调一下，就是说进有出嘛，所以一层细胞膜就是有 two layer membranes， 然后 hemoglobin there's no membrane inside, okay? And then 你可以看到题目它特别写明assume there's no pore between the cell, so假设这个细胞之间是没有这个缝隙的，就是说它没有这个孔嘛，让这个气体直接穿透就是这样子，没有，所以就是为了堵死这个氧气从细胞缝隙挤过的这种可能性，它必须要走这个 transcellular pathway， 就是说 from one cell to another cell. Refer to the hemoglobin affinity to the oxygens decrease due to what? Due to there is a increase in the carbon dioxide concentrations and the lower pH due to increasing in the hydrogen ions concentrations. So the answer will be C, number 2 and 3. So just imagine this way, the body cell, okay, what they do is they will release the carbon dioxide to where? To the red blood cell. So this is the red blood cell, okay? So the carbon dioxide will combine with the water in the red blood cell, become the carbonic acids. So here is the carbonic acids, H2CO3. So later this carbonic acid, they will undergo dissociation, become hydrogen ions and the bicarbonate ions. So this bicarbonate ion, it will diffuse out, and then the chloride ion will shift into balance and negative charge. So this free hydrogen ion, right, they will combine with the hemoglobins. So at the same time, the oxygens will be released to the body cell, okay, due to the dissociation of the oxyhemoglobin, okay. So they will release the oxygens, and then there will be the free hemoglobins. So the free hemoglobin, they can bind to the hydrogen ions, become the hemoglobinic acids. So this is the buffer. Shaped cell is referred to the monocytes, which is a kidney bean shaped like shell, which is a kidney bean shaped like nucleus. And then what is ball shape? Okay, ball shape refer to the A. So it shows that mutations occurs in one of the genes coded for the hemoglobins. So this mutation, they will lower the partial pressure oxygens at which hemoglobin is 50% saturated with oxygens. So this means what? This means that the hemoglobin, they doesn't need as much oxygen pressure to get half full. It grabs oxygen very easily, even though the oxygen is scarce, which is the less amount of oxygen. Even though there's a less amount of oxygen, the hemoglobin, they can combine with the oxygen easily. So when the partial pressure of so it means that the hemoglobin, they has a higher affinity for the oxygen. It can pick up oxygen more readily. So high affinity refer to the curve, right? They need to shift to left side. Okay, the high affinity means that the curve rise stiffly and they stay more to the left side. So at any given partial pressure, the saturations of the hemoglobin with the oxygen is higher. So that is A. Because it will increase the affinity of the hemoglobins to the oxygens after mutations. For 这个 curve, right, 它是有这个 left shift 跟 right shift 嘛，对吧？这个是 shift more to the left side， 这个是 shift more to the right side。所以这个 left shift 的意思就是说，这个 oxyhemoglobin 它 tend to stay together， 因为这个 hemoglobins they have higher affinity towards oxygen， so 这个要 left shift。如果 right shift 的话，代表这个 hemoglobins 它 tend to release oxygen of the amphibians hearts. This image shows the structure of the amphibian hearts. So amphibian hearts they have about 3 chambers, so which is about 2 atria, left side and right side, and 1 single undivided ventricles. So that's is number 1 and 3. Okay, because you want to compare the amphibian hearts to the mammals hearts, right? So mammal heart have 4 chambers, but amphibian they only have about 3 chambers. Okay, so number 2, right? They have a different number of atrial ventricular valve. Yeah, definitely. And then there's a septums. Okay, septums assist in the human heart, but septum is not found in the amphibian hearts. So when the left atriums, which carry the oxygen, the blood transports into the left ventricles. So the left ventricles they will increase in the blood pressures. So the blood pressures, how they increase in the blood pressure is by the contractions of the left ventricles. So this whole left ventricle, right, they will have contractions. So they will increase the blood pressures. So what will happen is it will force the atrial ventricular valve. So you can see here is the atrial ventricular valve, which is referred to the tricuspid and the bicuspid valve. So at here, which is on the left side, right, there will be the bicuspid valve. There will be the bicuspid valve, or sometimes we call it as a mitral valve. So that's why the valve will close. Okay, so this is prevent the backflow of the blood from the ventricles to the atriums. The answer is A. So carbonic anhydrase with catalyzed reactions and carbon dioxide and waters to form the carbonic acid. This is correct. And then the carbonic acid, because it's unstable, so it will dissociate, become the hydrogen ions and hydrogen carbonic ions. Also correct. And so we know that about 85%, okay, 85% of carbon dioxide is being transported in form of the hydrogen carbonate ions. Then about 5% will dissolve in the blood plasma. And then left about 10% will be the carbon dioxide will be combined, okay, with the hemoglobin to form the carbaminohemoglobins. So this is the 10%. Okay, so number 4 is incorrect. It's because hemoglobin they will combine with the hydrogen ions, which is released from the carbonic acids, become the hemoglobin acid. Which label point on the oxygen dissociation curve will result in the highest concentration of the hemoglobin acids? So when you look at this graph, right, 你用2种方式来看。第一个是说，你可以把这个 graph 对不对，就是看成它是往 left shift 还是往 right shift 的。所以很明显，这个 graph 对吗？这个曲线这个 graph 啊，它是往 right shift 的。往 right shift 的意思就是说2种原因，一个是它有很高的这个 hydrogen ions due to there's a high concentration of the carbon dioxide in the blood plasma, so it will tend to release the oxygens. Okay, which is it will cause the hemoglobins have a less affinity towards the oxygen. They will tend to release the oxygens. 这个是第一点啦。And then secondly, you need to 看另外一个角度，就是说你可以把这个曲线对吗？ OK， 看成是2个部分 ，OK， 就是说从这里到这里的第一个部分，然后从这里这是第二个部分，所以我们看成是 A 跟 B 来讲哦。所以你看啊 ，A 的这个部分来讲是说这个oxyhemoglobin 啊，就是说这个 hemoglobin 它 tend to bind to oxygen to form the oxyhemoglobin. OK， 这个就是说 at the low partial pressure oxygens， 就是说在一个很低的这个氧气浓度的情况下，所以这个 oxyhemoglobin 它 tend to dissociate to release the oxygens to the tissue, to the respiring tissue, because there's a very low partial pressure oxygens. But what is in the regions B, okay, which is the oxyhemoglobin, they will tend to combine, to form these oxyhemoglobins. So which is happen at the high partial pressure of the oxygens. So how to result in the highest concentration of hemoglobin acids? So hemoglobin acid is being formed when the carbon dioxide combined with the waters, and then the dissociations of the hydrogen carbonates, dissociation of the carbonic acids. So later the carbonic acid, after they dissociate, they will produce the hydrogen carbonate ions and also the hydrogen ions. So these hydrogen ions, they will combine with the hemoglobin. So they will become what? Hemoglobinic acids. So these hydrogen ions, they will combine with the hemoglobin to form the hemoglobinic acids. So hemoglobinic acids is being produced as a result of the carbon dioxide is being carried by the red blood cell. So this is happened when the carbon dioxide concentration is very high, but the oxygen concentration is very, very low. So the answer is B. So just remember that at the venule ends of the capillary, so there will be high in the water potentials for the tissue fluids. It's because at the venule end of capillary, right, there will be a lot of the plasma proteins around here, and then plasma protein is too large, they are unable to go out to the tissue fluid. So these plasma proteins, what they do is they will reduce the water potential. So this will cause the tissue fluid become high in the water potential, because tissue fluid, they have a less plasma proteins. So that's why the answer is C. So high water potential from the tissue fluid will cause the diffusion of waters into the. This is capillary. So remember that the blood capillary, the lumen size is about 7 micrometer, but the red blood cell, their diameter is around 6 to 8 micrometer. So whenever the red blood cell, they are flow within the lumen of blood capillary, they will be squeezed, like in this. See, they are being squeezed. In the hearts at the start of ventricular diastole, so the answer is B. So which is at this stage? Diastole. Diastole refers to both atrium and ventricles, they are being relaxed. So this is the stage where the hearts, they receive the blood from the vena cava. So the deoxygenated bloods, they will flow, they're being transported from the vena cava back to the atriums of the heart, which is the atrium of the heart. Then from the atrium, right, they will go to the ventricle later. So this will be in the atrial systole stage. So the atrial systole stage is the stage later, which is the atrium will contract, and then they will push the blood, right, to the ventricles, because ventricle is relaxed. So that's why at the atrial and ventricular diastole, right, both atrium and ventricle relax. So it will cause the AV valve will open. So the AV valve will open because they just want to receive the blood. But the semilunar valve, which is at this place, okay, they will just close. So here will be closed. Here, which is the semilunar valve, include the aortic valve and pulmonary valve, they will be closed. So both the AV valve, right, which is here and here, AV valve, they will just open. But when they go to the atrial systole phase, right, the AV valve, they will still open. Okay, and then the semilunar valve, right, they will just still close. But the difference is at the atrial systole stage, right, the atriums still contracts. Okay, the atrium will contract because they want to push the blood from the atriums to the ventricles. 所以这个就是在我们讲这个舒张期的时候，舒张就是 diastole， 就是说在这个 atrium 跟 ventricle 他们都在放松休息的时候，所以这个时候血液会从这个静脉回流进这个心房里面，在过后再从这个 atrium 再慢慢的漏进这个心室里面。 所以这个时候 AV valve 会打开，可是这个 similar valve 还会关闭。Require some simple calculation because they ask about change in the percentage of oxygen saturations at the 6 kPa. So you need to calculate from the 6 kPa, change from 1.0 kPa to 1.5 kPa. So which one is the initial value? Which one is the final value? So this is the final value. 1.5 kPa is the final value. Then 1.0 is the initial value. So you need to use the final value to minus the initial value. So that's why from the 1.5 kPa, right, is around 50%. So you can see here, right, it's a 50%. Yeah, you need to calculate the scale bar, okay? So one scale bar, right, is equal to 2 like that. And then 1.0 kPa at the 6 kPa, it will reach about 70% saturations of hemoglobin with oxygen. So that's why it is 50% and initial is 70%. So that's why 50% minus 70%, you get negative 20%. 所以记得啊，要用 final value 减掉 initial value 才可以拿那个答案。These are made from the 3-layer inner, middle, and outer layer. So the answer is C. The inner layer is made from the smooth layer of the squamous cell. Middle layers, they consist of the collagen fibers, okay, and also the elastic fiber. Elastic fiber is just like this, okay, they're able to stretch. And then they will have a smooth muscle also. So that's why they can do the vasodilation and vasoconstrictions. And then the outer layer, which is a tunica externa, okay, they are made from the collagens and elastic fibers. So why A and B is wrong? Because A and B talk about endodermis cell. Endodermis cell are not exist in the artery. Endodermis cells are found in the plant tissue, right? So still remember in the chapter 7, plant transport, you learn about the endodermis cell. Yeah. So endodermis cells are found in the plant's roots. Okay, so they can help to control the water and also the nutrient flow, such as the ions, okay, into the plants. So take note of the spelling error. And then so another thing is, a lot of students, they confuse about the term, okay? So what's endotheliums, squamous cell, and endodermis, okay? So endotheliums, right, it refers to the tissue layer, which is referred to the lining the blood vessel. So just like see in this image, right, this show that this whole lining, right, is endothelium. But this endothelium is made from the squamous cell. So this squamous cell I refer to this one, okay? You can see, right, here's a cell, here's a cell. They are all built on squamous cell. So the squamous cell are very thin, okay? They form the one cell thick lining to allow easy filtration and diffusion later. So endodermis, which is found in the plant root, they help to filter water and nutrients entering into the plant. So that's the difference. And then let's talk about the 3-layer of the artery. So the squamous cell, okay? And then the squamous cell, right, actually the correct terms, right, is known as endotheliums, which is made from the squamous cell. Endothelium is referred to the linings. And then the middle layer will be made from the collagen fibers, elastic, and muscle. So they can have an elastic fiber for pulse and recoils, and also collagen for strength, to maintain the strength of the blood vessel wall. And then the outer layer, which is tunica adventitia, is comprised of collagen fibers and the elastic fibers for protection and movements. Why first one is wrong? Because carbon dioxide combined with hemoglobins, they will not become hemoglobinic acids. Instead, they will become the carbaminohemoglobin. So hemoglobinic acid is being formed when the hemoglobin, they act as a buffer to combine with the hydrogen ions, which is released from the dissociations of the carbonic acids. So you can see, right, this is the carbonic acids. So they would dissociate, become H plus and the bicarbonate ions. So later these hydrogen ions, right, they will be combined with the hemoglobin, so they will become HHB, which is the hemoglobinic acids. And then number C, carbon dioxide is released when carbonic acid and water react together. This is also incorrect, because carbon dioxide will be released only when the carbonic acids H2CO3 they undergo dissociations， 就是说它们会分开 carbonic acids， 它会分开变成 H2O 加 CO2， 所以通过这样的方式他们会去 release 这个 carbon dioxide. So later the carbon dioxide, right, they will be exhaled out by the exhalation， 就是说在呼气的时候carbon dioxide 会出来，会通过呼气的时候 exhalation 它会释放出来。Now the greater or concentration of carbon dioxide in the blood, there will be lower affinity， 不是 higher 是 lower。Because lower affinity 就是说这个 hemoglobin 它对氧气的这个亲和力变低所以它会更加容易去释放 oxygens to the respiring tissue. Of the hearts, right? So this A, right, is the aorta. So you can see, right, this is the aorta. Aorta is the largest artery in our body. So D, right, is branched out from the right side. Okay, so here is the right side, here is the left side. Okay, why? Because left side, right, they have a thicker ventricle wall. So this D will be the pulmonary artery. So how about B? B will be the left atrium. C will be the right atrium. So the answer is C. Tissue fluid will be reabsorbed back to the venule end of the blood capillary. So the answer is donkey, due to the osmotic movement of water from tissue fluid into the blood. So what's meant by osmotic movements? Osmotic movement, right, is due to the required osmotic pressures. So we can just imagine, right, this is the arterial end, this is the venule ends, and then at the venule end, right, there's a large amount of the plasma proteins. The large plasma protein accumulate. So here's a large plasma proteins. So this plasma protein is very large in their size. So that's why they are unable to diffuse through the pore. They are unable to diffuse through the pore of the blood capillary. 就是说在这个 venule end 里面它有一个很高浓度的这个 plasma protein， 因为它们太大了，所以它们无法穿透这个血管的洞口出去。所以就是因为这样的原因 large plasma proteins at the venule end, right, it will cause what? It will cause this side, right, they become very low in the water potential. Low water potential because there's a high concentration in the plasma protein. So plasma protein, right, is a kind of solid. Okay, because you have more solute than the water, so it will reduce the water potential. So as compared to the outside tissue fluid, right, outside tissue fluid, they have about higher, okay, they have a higher water potential. Why? It's because outside tissue fluid, they have lower proteins, lower plasma protein. So that's why the water will diffuse from the tissue space into the venule ends of the capillary through the osmosis. Because that capillary wall is more permeable in arterial ends than venule end. This is incorrect, okay? Because both arterial and venule end, right, they have same pore size. 就说他们的这个血管壁的洞口不管在 arterial 还是在这个 venule end 都是一样的 size, same size. And then hydrostatic pressure in the tissue fluid is higher in the blood. Wrong. So hydrostatic pressure is highest in the arterial ends, which is from the arteries. So there is a higher concentration of dissolved solids in the tissue fluid than in the blood. So this is also incorrect because dissolved solid, right, they are found higher concentrations in the blood, not in the tissue fluid. Tissue fluid, they have a very low solid concentrations because due to the pores is very small, so only some molecule with a smaller inside able to diffuse out, get into the tissue space. Question's answer is A. Heart block is a disease result in lower than normal heart rates The doctors found out that electrical impulses were initiated as normal, but were not correctly conducted to the ventricles. So, since the electrical impulse were initiated as normal, so this shows that the sinoatrial nodes, which is this nodes, it is normal. Because the function of the sinoatrial node is responsible for initiating the impulse. Okay, yeah, initiating the impulse. 就是说这个 SA node 来说，它是一个心脏的这个起搏器。所以当这个电信号嘛，这个 electrical impulse were initiated as normal， 这个就是说它这个电信号像往常一样正常起始，就是开始那个，所以这代表这个 SA node 本身这个起搏器它是正常的。所以可是有问题的是这个 right ventricular contraction were slow， 这个是就是说这个电信号它没有正确的传导至这个 ventricles， 所以它会导致这个 ventricular contraction 变得比较慢，比以往的慢。所以这个 keyword not correctly conducted to the ventricles tell us the problem lie in the pathway between the initiation point, which is the SA node, and then to the ventricles. So the pathway will be the AV nodes. Yeah, so it means that the AV node, they have some issue. Because the function of AV node is they will receive the signals from the SA nodes and then pass to the ventricles. So if the AV node is malfunctioning, 就是说如果 AV node 它是不正常的，它会导致这个 signal is being delayed or blocked from reaching the lower chamber. 所以如果这个 AV node 有什么问题的话，它会导致这个信号延迟，或者是直接中断，无法传到下面这个 ventricular muscle。然后这个 Purkinje fiber， 这个是属于第三个 ，OK， 就是 after AV node 就到这个 Purkinje fiber， 所以这个 Purkinje fibers 本身来说，它是一个 fibers， 它 carry the electrical impulse throughout the whole ventricular wall, and then they will trigger the contractions。所以这个信号还会传到整个心脏的这个肌肉，然后会刺激收缩。所以 if the tissue is being damaged, the signal will not be conducted properly through the ventricles. 所以如果这个 Purkinje fiber 本身有问题的话，它这个信号也不会传到这个 ventricles， 所以这个 ventricle 它就不会做这个 contractions。The answer is D. Increasing hydrogen ion concentrations will reduce the hemoglobin affinity for oxygens. Why? It's because when there is an increase in the carbon dioxide level, right? So the carbon dioxide will be entered into the red blood cell. So we can see inside here is the red blood cell. So what happens inside red blood cell is carbon dioxide will combine with the water, and then they become a carbonic acid, okay, which is the H2CO3. So this carbonic acid is unstable compound, so that's why they will dissociate, become H plus and HCO3 minus, which is bicarbonate ions. So that's why the H plus, they will increase in the red blood cell, okay? So in order to prevent there's further increase in the acidity, so that's why the hemoglobin, okay, initially the oxyhemoglobin, right, they will undergo dissociations. So they will release HB to the to the red blood cell. So that's why the hemoglobin is being free now. So that's why the free hemoglobin, they can bind to the hydrogen ions. So they will become what? H plus HB, right? They will become the hemoglobin acid, HHB. So this one is known as hemoglobinic acids. So that's why it will reduce the affinity of the hemoglobin toward the oxygen. So later the oxygen, right, they can be released to the tissue. What is the reason for this increasing in red blood cell in this baby? So the answer is donkey. Because there's hole between right and the left atrium, right? So it will cause the mixing of the oxygenated blood from the left side and the deoxygenated blood from the right side. See, mix of the oxygen-rich blood and then oxygen-poor blood. So this will reduce the concentration of the oxygens in the body tissue. Okay, so in order to compensate this lacking of oxygens, the body will produce more red blood cell, attempt to increase its oxygen carrying capacity. 就是说，因为这个 atrium 之间的这个 wall 有孔， 所以会导致这个 right side 跟 left side atrium 里面这个血啊，它们混合在一起，所以会 lead to the mixing of the oxygenated and the deoxygenated blood。所以也就是因为这样子，当这个血从这个 left ventricle 输送到前人的这个器官的时候，它这个血是 lacking of oxygen 的，因为它有 mix with the deoxygenated blood。所以 in order to allow more oxygen supply to the body cell, right? So body will compensate by produce more red blood cell. 所以它可以去 increase 这个红血球的数量。Okay, so by increasing the number of red blood cell, the body will try to maximize the amount of oxygen it can transport to the vital organ。就说当它增加这个红血球数量之后，身体他们会尝试去输送更加多的氧气，输送这个氧气去到身体我们这个重要的这个器官啊。虽然在这个血里面的这个氧气是非常低的，可是他们就是尝试去增加这个红血球数量嘛，希望它可以输送到那个氧气，以达到这个身体的这个供应，身体的这个需求。所以为什么 A、B、C 不是答案呢？因为 A blood is pumped faster will cause more blood to circulate in the heart。这个也跟它完全没有关系。Okay, more blood is needed in the heart because pressure is lower。这个也是跟它无关。So while the heart might beat faster or work harder to move blood, right? So a faster pump rate or lower pressure does not signal the bone marrow to create more red blood cell。不管是你的这个我们讲的心脏的这个心跳次数有多快，还是你的这个血压 blood pressure 有多高还是多低有多低都好，你都不会直接刺激到你这个骨髓去生产更多的这个红血球。然后 C 也是不对的 ，OK， 因为这个 hemoglobin's affinity to the oxygen, right, 是受到这个环境的因素影响特别是它是受到这个 concentration of the hydrogen ion 影响。就是说如果这个 concentration of hydrogen ion 很高的话，代表你的这个 body cell body tissue 是需要更加多的 oxygen， 所以that's why 它会去 reduce affinity 它会去我们讲 reduce affinity of the hemoglobin to the oxygen so 它可以去 release more oxygen to the tissue because respiring tissue require oxygen supply。 所以它的这个 affinity 是不会改变的，虽然 there's a hole between the heart wall。 This is B. So when you increase the carbon dioxide concentrations, means that you are actually increasing the H plus ions in the blood. So you will cause the right shift of the curve. So right shift means that the hemoglobin become less efficient at taking out oxygen because they are actually reduce the affinity of the hemoglobins to the oxygens. So that's why it more efficient at releasing oxygen. 就说这个血红蛋白它对于这个氧气的这个亲和力越低，因为它是 right shift. Each area of heart could be damaged, causing irregular heartbeat. 心跳不规律。The answer is D, sinoatrial nodes. Because sinoatrial node is known as the heart natural pacemaker, it is located in the right atrium and responsible for initiating the electrical signals trigger the heartbeats. So if there's damage in the SA nodes, it is unable to effectively stimulate the atria, leading to irregular heartbeats or an abnormal heart rate. 就是说这个 sinoatrial node 它是作为这个心脏的发电机，位于这个心脏的这个 right side right atrium， 所以它负责这个心脏每一个起始电信号来触发每次心跳。所以你看它这个题目就是说 irregular heartbeat due to the result of ineffective electrical stimulations of atria， 指的是说它的这个心房受到无效的电刺激。所以既然这个电信号本身是从这个 SA node 开始的，所以如果它受损的话，它就无法有效的去刺激这个心房，而导致心跳不规则。 irregular heartbeat 就是说心跳不规则，就是一下子快，一下子很慢，一下子很快，一下子很慢。而为什么其他的这个现象，比如说 AV node 跟 Purkinje tissue 它不是个答案呢？是因为他们是负责这个信号传到这个，负责这个信号传出这个 ventricle 之后，让这个 ventricle 收缩的过程，所以他们是和这个 irregular heartbeat 是没有太大的关系，因为他们主要做的是去做 for 这个 ventricular contractions他们主要做的是这个。 ventricle contraction. So AV node Purkinje tissue handle the signal after it leaves the atria and make the ventricle contracts. So damage there would not typically described as ineffective stimulation of atria. Are present in the tissue fluid is A. Include the phagocyte. The phagocyte including the lymphocytes and any kind of white blood cell. And some protein, just like this protein is the smaller size, okay? It's a small size protein. So that's why they're able to pass through the pores of the capillary wall and get into the tissue space, and then they'll become tissue fluid. And then ions also. So the tissue fluid, right, they will not contain the large cellular component like in the red blood cell. Okay, there's no red blood cell in the So there's no red blood cell in the tissue fluids, no platelets, no large plasma proteins. Because their size is too large, they are unable to pass through the pore. 就是说在这个 tissue fluid 里面呢，它是没有那种比较大的这个细胞，比如说红血球、一些蛋白质，还有血小板。Atrioventricular nodes is at B. So B is a position which the AV nodes located between the lower part of the interatrial septum. So we can look at this picture, right? Yeah, the AV node is located between the interatrial septums, which is between the right atriums and also the left ventricle around here. The SA node, say SA node is located around here. And then here will be the bundle of His. And then branch out, become the Purkinje fibers. How oxygen combine with hemoglobin? The answer is B. One oxygen molecule can combine with each heme group of hemoglobin molecule, because one hemoglobin molecule, there has about 4 heme groups. 4 heme groups. So each heme group, they will contain an iron atom, which is this iron atom, okay? The Fe. This Fe2 plus iron atoms. So each iron atoms, they can bind with one oxygen molecule. So one hemoglobin, right, they can carry 4 oxygen molecules in total. It's because one hemoglobin, they consist of 4 iron atoms. So it will be like this, which is one hemoglobin, they can bind with 4 oxygens, they become HbO8. And then why in this question, right, the answer, the other choice is incorrect. Okay. For the A, combining A is incorrect because combining all 4 oxygen molecules will change its shapes. Okay, so this will change. This will change the shape of hemoglobins. So this is called as what? Conformational change. So even though there's first oxygens bind to the heme groups on the hemoglobin, right, it will induce a conformational change to whole hemoglobin molecule. It will induce a change to whole proteins. So it will make the second oxygen atoms more easier to bind to the heme groups. And then C, the first oxygen molecule is actually the most important one, and then it will change the shapes. Okay, so this does not affect, it's wrong, okay, because it will change the shape. Because it will change the shape. it will change the shape of the hemoglobins. Because the first oxygens, right, when they bind to hemoglobin, it will just open up the molecule, become more easier for second oxygen to bind with it. 就说第一个氧气分子的结合，它们对于这个 hemoglobin 这个形状改变是最大的。所以一旦第一个分子可以跟 hemoglobin 结合，它可以把这个整个分子形状拉开，让这个结构变得更加的松散，所以这会非常容易的让第二个 oxygen molecule bind with the hemoglobin. And then the third oxygen molecule, right, combine make it become more difficult. This is incorrect, okay? It's not become more difficult, it's become more easier. So this is due to what? This is due to the cooperating binding. 就是叫做协同结合。So the first, second, and third oxygen molecule, it make it easier for the next oxygen molecule to combine with the heme groups. For these questions, the answer is C. If you compare the oxygen curve with the human and cat side, you can see humans are shift more to the left side, but the cat, they are shift more to the right side. So left side means that the hemoglobin, they has a higher affinity for the oxygens. Okay, they are actually increasing the affinity to the oxygen. 就是说这个 hemoglobin 它对 oxygen 的亲和力更高。如果是 left side 的话，如果是 right side 的话它是 reduce affinity. Okay, 就是说这个 hemoglobin, they reduce affinity to the oxygen. So that's why the human curve, they have higher oxygen affinity. So that's why the oxygen unloading to the lungs, right, they are more efficient. But the oxygen unloading to tissue, they are less efficient because the hemoglobin, they stick more to the oxygen. So that's why they will tend to not release the oxygen to the tissue. But however, in the cat curve, right, which is right shifted, so the oxygen affinity is lower. Refer to the hemoglobin, they has a lower affinity to the oxygens. So that's why the oxygen loading to the lung will become less efficient because the hemoglobins, the oxyhemoglobin, they tend to release the oxygen to the tissue, so it become more efficient for the oxygen unloading the tissue. So answer is C. And then why A, B, D is wrong, right? A, okay, the affinity for the cat hemoglobin for the oxygen is greater than affinity. So no, this is lower, okay? The cat will be lower affinity of hemoglobins for the oxygens. And then B, at the high partial pressure of oxygens, the cat hemoglobin pick up oxygen more easily than the human hemoglobin pick up the oxygens. So actually, they pick up the oxygen less easily because the cat hemoglobin tend to release the oxygen to the tissue. And then D. D is cannot be concluded because that the graph, right, they show the constant curve they show both curve at the constant partial pressure of the carbon dioxide, which is around 5 kPa, which is around here 5 kPa. So that's why you provide no data how the curve shift when the partial pressure of carbon dioxide level change. Ask about the change in the volume of ventricles in the single cardiac cycles. So there will be 3 stages: atrial systole, ventricular systole, and diastole. So we can look about what happened at the P. So atrial systole already ends, starting of the ventricular systole. So you can see the change in the volume, which is during the atrial systole, right? Because atrial systole refers to the contraction of the atrium occurs. So the atrium, they will pump the blood to the ventricle. So that's why the volume ventricles, right, start to slowly increase because they just receive the blood from the atrium. Then later, the ventricular systole, they will start. So the P, which refer to the, at this point, right, the AV valve, they will close. Okay, so when the ventricles start to do the contraction, right, it will increase in the pressure. So it might be lead to the backflow of the blood to the atrium. So that's why the AV valve need to be closed. And then RR refer to the ending of the ventricles. Okay, ending of the ventricular systole. So the ventricle already finished pump the blood to the aorta and the pulmonary artery. So at this point, right, in order to prevent the backflow of the blood from the aorta and the artery back to the left and right ventricle, so that's why the seminal valve need to be closed. So later, they will go to the diastole stage, which is at this phase, right, the AV valve, they will start to open. So that's why they can allow the increasing in the volume of the ventricles, because they just receive the blood. The blood is just refilled into the heart. So the answer is A. And the answer is C. Okay, which is first will be the sinoatrial nerves. Sinoatrial is a pacemaker. It will initiate the heartbeats, and then moving to the muscle wall atria, which is the located with the atrioventricular nodes, and then followed by the Purkinje tissue, which will stimulate the contractions of the left ventricles and the right ventricles. Okay, for these questions, the oxyhemoglobin, carbaminohemoglobin, carbonic anhydrase are found inside the red blood cell, and how many these substances show overall decreasing in the concentrations as the red blood cell pass through the capillary in the lung. So just imagine that here is the alveolus, right? And then inside the alveolus, there's a very high oxygen concentrations. So this alveolus, right, they will be closely associated with the blood capillary here. So inside the blood capillary, right, there's a lot of red blood cell. Okay, so what will happen for the oxyhemoglobin? So just remember that in the lungs, the oxygen will be released. So just imagine that, which is in the oxyhemoglobin, the oxygen will be released from the alveolus, get into the blood capillary and diffuse to the red blood cell. Means that oxygen will be uptake by the red blood cell, and then red blood cell consists of hemoglobin. So for the oxyhemoglobin, right, which is the oxygen will bind to the hemoglobin to become the oxyhemoglobin. So that's why this concentrations of the oxyhemoglobin is actually increasing. 就是说在这个肺部里面，这个 hemoglobin 它会和 oxygen 结合，变成这个 oxyhemoglobin， 所以这个浓度是上升的。Then how about the second one? Okay, the second one, talk about carbaminohemoglobin. So in the second one, the carbaminohemoglobins refer to this one, HbCO2. So this is actually the hemoglobin's molecule carry the carbon dioxide. So we call it as carbaminohemoglobin. So in the lung, actually the carbon dioxide, they detach, okay, in the lung, right, because the carbon dioxide need to be released back to the alveolus. So just imagine here is a carbon dioxide. Carbaminohemoglobin, which is the HbCO2. So actually the hemoglobin, they will tend to release the carbon dioxide from the red blood cell back to the alveolus. So later they will do the exhalations. So in the lung, okay, the carbon dioxide will be detached from the hemoglobin. So later the carbon dioxide will be diffused back to the alveoli and to be exhaled out. So that's why the concentration of the carbaminohemoglobin, right, actually is decreasing. Then now we look about the hemoglobinic acids. So the hemoglobinic acids, so the hemoglobinic acids, it refers to this one, okay, which is the HHB. So hemoglobinic acids act as a buffer, okay. So it actually is a buffer carrying the hydrogens combined with the hemoglobins. So in the lung, right, it must be released the H+, which is the hemoglobinic acids, right? They need to undergo the dissociations. So that's why the hydrogen ions, they can be react with the bicarbonate ions. And then it will become the water and the CO2. So that's why the hemoglobinic acid, right, actually it is reducing. The hemoglobinic acid, right, actually is reducing.这就是因为这个 hemoglobin acid 啊，它是 carry 着这个 H plus ion 的，所以在这个肺部里面的时候，它需要把这个 H plus release 出来，所以这样这个 H plus 才可以和这个 HCO3 minus 这个 bicarbonate ion 结合，变成这个 carbon dioxide， 再排出体外，通过 exhalation， 所以这个 hemoglobin acid 的浓度是下降的。然后接着我们来看最后一个，就是这个 carbonic anhydrase。OK， 我们来看这个 carbonic anhydrase。所以 carbonic anhydrase 来讲，它是 unchanged， 因为它只是一个 enzyme 啊。So this enzyme, right, what they do is they actually catalyze, okay, the reactions. Okay, so this carbonic anhydrase, they will catalyze this reaction, which is the carbon dioxide that will just combine with the water, become the carbonic acid, H2CO3. Which is a carbonic acid. Yeah, so this is catalyzed by the enzyme, which is the carbonic anhydrase. So the enzyme just remain unchanged. Okay, so remember that the amount of enzyme always remain constant because enzyme are not being used up or being consumed. 就说酶它是一个催化剂，它不会在反应过程中被消耗掉，所以浓度是保持不变的。So the answer is 2, okay? Because the carbamino hemoglobin and also the hemoglobin acid, right, they're showing the decreasing in concentrations. This statement showing about the tissue fluid formation is correct, so the answer is A. Because arterial ends, they have a highest hydrostatic pressure as compared to venule ends. Venule ends have a lower hydrostatic pressures. And then why B is incorrect is because that the water pressure is always higher in the blood in capillary than the tissue fluid in the surrounding tissue. This is incorrect, okay? Because sometimes the tissue fluid, right? Because actually, due to the presence of the plasma proteins in the blood capillary, so that's why sometimes the blood capillary, right, they have a lower water potential as compared to the tissue fluid. So that's why the water will diffuse by osmosis from the tissue space enter to the blood capillary. And then no cell move out of the blood into the capillary into the tissue fluid. This is also incorrect. There will be some of the cell move out, okay? For example, like the proteins, the small proteins, and the white blood cell, okay? White blood cell also can move out to the tissue space. Answer is donkey. It's a correct answer. So water will cool down slowly because it has a high specific heat capacity. What's mean by this? 就是说水具有很高的这个比日容，代表就是说水在温度改变之前，它必须要一个吸收非常大量的这个热能，所以正因为这个水它可以储存很多的这个热能，所以这个温度的下降是非常的缓慢的。所以它可以帮助这个人体保持一个稳定的体温 ，help to regulate in the body temperature in a constant body temperature. So why A is incorrect is because water is solvent for all biological molecule. Biological molecule including the proteins, lipids, DNAs, and also the carbohydrates. So water cannot dissolve lipids because lipid is hydrophobic. And then how about this one? Water is solvent for non-polar molecule. Okay, non-polar, this is incorrect because water is a polar molecule. Polar means what? Polar means that the water molecule, right, they have a positive and negative, and so that's why water can dissolve polar substance or ions. Water does not dissolve non-polar molecule. And then for this one, water requires little energy. This is incorrect because it should be require a lot of energy. Because there's a lot of energy need to be absorbed by water in order to raise the temperature. It will cause the blood move from left atriums to the right atriums. So that's why the left atrium, they have a lot of oxygenated blood, right? So that's why there will be increase in the oxygen concentrations in the right side. So that's why the answer is donkey. The blood pressure in the pulmonary artery will be increased because there will be increasing in the blood enters into the right ventricles, enters into the right atriums. So that's why the blood pressure increase, because there is an increasing in the blood volume, and then blood pressure in the aorta will decrease because they will lose some part of the blood leak into the right atriums. And then there will be increase in the oxygenations of blood in the pulmonary artery because the left side, they have the oxygenated blood. So let's say it's donkey.